In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to set up automatic puddles controlled by a weather system using wet stuff. In this demo, I'm going to be using Enviro specifically, but the same instructions apply to any weather integration. So the first thing to do is to add a wetness source. This is a component that integrates wet stuff with your weather system, and it tells wet stuff how wet the current weather actually is. So since I'm demonstrating this with Enviro, I'm going to add an Enviro wetness, and I'm going to add this to the Enviro sky component, but it can go anywhere in the scene. So the second thing to set up is a puddle itself. So I've created here a puddle game object, and I've added an Auto Rain Puddle component. Now you can see that this has a warning. It needs a reference to the wetness source. So I'm going to add that. And it also needs a reference to a puddle. So I'm also going to drop in that prefab. If we take a quick look at the prefab, you can see this is a pretty standard wet decal. If we go back to the auto puddle, we've set up the references correctly, so there's no longer a warning there. Now there are a lot of other settings, but you can actually ignore most of these settings most of the time. So the wet state is the state that the puddle is in when it's at its maximum wetness. So that is completely drenched. The dry state is the opposite. That's the state that the puddle is in when it's completely dry. Now the raining curve is the curve that determines how it transitions from the dry state to the wet state as the weather integration system says it's raining. And the drying curves are the opposite. These are the curves that the system follows to go from wet to dry as the weather system says that it's not raining. So you can see over here that this is simply playing on a loop because I have the auto play checkbox ticked and it's currently drying out. So you can see all the spots of wetness are drying out. And it looks like it's completely dry now. So then if you look closely, in a second, you can see the rain starting to build up. Everything's getting wetter. And there's some spots of very wet building up. And it looks like it's reached the max. And now it's drying out again. So when you're tweaking these settings, you can leave it on the autoplay mode, and that'll be quite helpful for tweaking them. Alternatively, what you can do is turn off autoplay, and you can explicitly choose whether it's raining or drying. So you can click the rain button, and again, spots start to build up. That's quite clear on top of the barrel. Everything gets darker and shinier, and it builds up to the maximum value. Now since autoplay is turned off, you can keep the scene in the wet state for as long as you like. So we can have a look at the scene, see whether we think it looks okay, maybe tweak some of these states a little bit, and then once we're happy we can click dry and see what it looks like again, drying out, and you can check that you're happy with the way that the curves are set up. Now you can create as many of these puddles as you like in the scene. You can hand place them to only wet the ground where it's exposed to the sky. You can also place dry decals, which will make parts of the ground dry, so I'll quickly demonstrate that. So for that you add a wet decal and you set it into dry mode. And I'm just going to turn down the scaling. So you can see we have one dry decal right in the middle. Now you can't see that at the moment because the ground is of course dry, but if I turn this onto rain mode, you can see that it starts to build up wetness, except where the dry decal is. So you can place those underneath roofs to keep the ground dry. You can cover the whole scene with as many puddles as you like, and it will all automatically go up and down as the weather starts and stops.